Hello and welcome to this humanities study day at the University of Southampton, which we've called Getting Back to the Future. My name is Professor Christer Petley and I'm just going to give you a short introduction to the day, thinking a little bit about why we're running this event and what you can expect from it. So I'd like to begin by asking you all a question. How does a good story begin? Take a moment to have a quick think about that, maybe cast your minds back to when you were children, sitting down with a parent or a grandparent and having a story read to you. And hopefully, lots of people are now at home in front of their laptops or mobile phones or however you're joining us, muttering the words "once upon a time." Because of course that is how good stories often begin. Now, I'd like to make a suggestion to you that although many stories begin with those words, once upon a time, and even if they're set, say, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, all stories, on some level, are true. And getting to the theme of today, all stories in some way are about the future. Now, let me try and show you what I mean, and I'll do this through the example of dragons. Now, I live my life surrounded by dragons. I live my life surrounded by dragons because I've got 3 small children. The eldest, Joseph, is now 8. He drew these pictures of dragons when he was 6 and was, and still to some degree is, obsessed with dragons, particularly these books that you have perhaps come across yourselves when you were younger, by Christer Petley, How to Train Your Dragon. These are amazing books. They tell a really vivid story of a young Viking boy, Hiccup Horrendous Haddock III. And Hiccup is also surrounded by dragons. And the story tells the tale of how Hiccup has to, as a young 13-year-old Viking boy, gain initiation into the tribe of the Hairy Hooligans by training his very mischievous small dragon, Toothless. And this is one part of the story. But it's also about a whole lot of other things. One of the other things that Hiccup has to encounter is a big dragon, a sea dragonus giganticus maximus. And in order to try to overcome all of these problems, Hiccup seeks advice from Old Wrinkly, an elder of the Hairy Hooligan tribe. Very sensible thing to do. If in doubt, as a young person, go and find an elder to mentor and guide you. And Old Wrinkly gives him advice about how to train Toothless, the little dragon, and also advice that helps him when it comes to dealing with the big dragon. Now, why am I telling you all about all of this? You've signed up for a day about getting back to the future, thinking about humanities subjects, and I'm telling you about children's books, which probably to some of you seems a bit strange. Now, all these stories, though, although they're about dragons, although they're for children, I'm arguing on some level are true. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean, some of you have perhaps thought this through yourselves already, is that there's an element of truth to these stories. The children who listen to them perhaps don't realise it, but these dragons are metaphors. They're metaphors for how, as a small child, you can overcome those little problems in your life. Small dragons. They're metaphors also for how, as a child, you might use patience and intelligence, as Hiccup does in the book, to overcome a big dragon, a major problem, a real challenge. That's one of the ways in which story works. Even when we're engaging with story that we think of as entertainment, it's somehow telling us something truthful about what it means to be human. And more than that, the story is telling us about how we should act in the world. Maybe not directly, often by implication, and that's sometimes how the best advice gets through to people. The story is telling us how we should try to shape our futures on an individual level, but also sometimes on a broader, more collective level. So, story is really, really essential to how we as human beings live our lives. And this is important, of course, to us in thinking about the humanities, because the humanities are all about thinking about human people, human beings, the human story, the human condition, and narrative and storytelling is really, really important if you think about it on so many levels to almost everything that we do. So I think story on some level is really, really important to the humanities, and it's also really, really essential to how we as human beings, whoever we are, whatever field we're working in, whatever tools we're working with, how we try to imagine the future and how we shape the future. So story is far more than just child's play. Story is essential to our culture. Story is essential to the way that we do politics, how power is organised and how we lead or are led. It's essential to how we think about our own story, collectively, our past, through history. And it's also really important to how we do business. You're sitting there every evening when you watch programmes on the TV, if there are adverts, watching a whole load of different stories that are being narrated to you about why you should behave in certain ways and choose to consume particular products. Just one example amongst many that you could look at about why story is essential to so much, including to business. Essentially, story is a part of all of our human interactions. Story and planning for the future have always been part of what it means to be human, and understanding what it means to be human is essential to the work of the humanities. And all of this, I would argue, is now more essential than it has ever been before. If you've watched the video, some of you may and some of you may not, if you've watched the video that we sent out to accompany this event, one of the things that I talk about towards the beginning of that is that we are now, all of us, living on a human planet. This is a very recent occurrence in the history of our world. Only in the last 200,000 years have human beings walked the earth out of the history of the earth, which is billions of years old, and the history of life on earth, which is millions of years old. Just a tiny little portion of that we Homo sapiens have been on the world, and it's really only in the last 400 years, particularly the last couple of centuries, that human beings have had a serious impact on the world. Now that's just a blink in the eye of the story of our planet, but it has absolutely transformed it. We've changed the world very rapidly as we've expanded rapidly as a species to the point that we're now living on a human planet. Human beings able inadvertently to change the climate of our planet. Human beings, by the way that they interact with their environment and with one another so intensively around the world, are able to spread a virus from one part of the world to another within a few days. So in so many ways, the recent history of our world is that it has become this human planet with human beings shaping the future of the world. One species really having the future of this particular planet in its hands. And that is something that's really remarkable and really utterly unprecedented. So what does this mean? Well, I think it means for us, particularly us interested in the humanities, that we need to think about the way that the future is going to be shaped. And if it's going to be shaped in a positive way, we have to think about what it means to be human. We also have to be able to think about what it means to be human, to be able to understand that, and through our work be able to tell true stories, plausible research-based stories about what that means and advise on where we should be going. And those, I think, are things that are fundamental to humanities subjects, which of course are particularly if you think about the subjects that we teach here at Southampton, the key humanities subjects are history, English, philosophy, languages, film, music and archaeology. And then there are some that are sort of on the edges. Some people count geography or elements of geography or of psychology as humanities subjects. And there is, of course, a close relationship with the social sciences. But for our purposes, these are the subjects that we are calling the humanities. So what do? Well, they answer this really fundamental question that we've been talking about. What does it mean to be human? How do we interact? How do we come into conflict? How do we unite? How do we learn? How do we plan? And how do we as human beings create? Now, whichever of those humanities subjects you're doing, history, English, philosophy, film, music, languages, archaeology, those questions are part and parcel of what you will be doing as a researcher or as a student looking at those subjects. Fundamentally, what we need to know about human beings through the humanities is what we've done and what we are capable of. This is really essential to thinking about global challenges, thinking about that future of the human planet. As this recent report by the British Academy puts it, the humanities give us the tools to examine and explain human behaviour. They help us to understand how society functions. They help us to learn from the past and apply those lessons to the present. What could be more important than that when it comes to thinking about our future? But the humanities are also important to the future in other, perhaps a bit more selfish, personal ways. Absolutely, they're important to us collectively, but to you as individuals. If you're thinking about studying the humanities at university, they will equip you to achieve all sorts of things and be very successful in your life after university. Why? Well, because the humanities train these really important competencies. They give you intellectual confidence. They help you to be a creative and original thinker. They help you with abstract reasoning, self-reliance, planning, teamwork, and much more besides. So to be a creative, original, and thoughtful person in the workplace or in any other sort of element of your life, the humanities can really help to equip you for your future. And a lot of this is backed up by research. So here is a very recent study by a centre at the University of Oxford, which did its research with prominent business leaders in the United Kingdom who see narrative as an integral part of doing business. So going back to that question that I started with about stories. Stories are essential to what it means to be human. Stories are part of how you will do research in the humanities, thinking about the stories people tell and writing your own plausible, truthful stories to communicate what you've discovered to others is a part of how you do your work as humanities students. And it's absolutely applicable when you leave university to a range of other things. It's absolutely integral to doing business. So based on this research, these researchers at the University of Oxford have highlighted how these skills associated with humanities subjects are valued and sought out in business contexts. It's just one example of a number of just how in demand humanities skills are in a modern workplace. So hopefully that gives you some sense of why we've chosen to run this event today. And I want to now finish by thinking a little bit more specifically about why we chose the particular image, which I really love, of these masks on the line for our day today, and a little bit more immediate context to why Getting Back to the Future is our title and theme. So we're now more than a year on after the start of the pandemic, and one of the reasons that we like this title and theme is that we're all of us now thinking about getting back to the future. You know, we're so keen, having been locked down so many times, to thinking about, you know, can we get back to life as normal, or at least back to a life that looks a bit more like it used to before the pandemic. We're keen to move on. But of course, you especially doing the work that you're doing at a point in your lives where you're thinking very carefully about your own future plans. What's the rest of your education? What's the rest of your career going to look like? So this is, I think, essential also to the day-to-day. In these really unusual circumstances, how is it that we can help you as young people to map out your own futures and make sense of where you're going? In the context of us all thinking together about our shared future, how are we going to shape this new normal that will emerge from the experience that we've all just been through with the pandemic? So those are just some reasons for wanting to run an event on these themes today. We want to get a conversation going about getting back to the future, and also about the importance to all of that of the humanities. So what's happening today? Well, next we've got a really fascinating taster lecture that I'm excited about by my colleague Dr. Helen Sperling, who is an ancient historian, who's going to talk to us about apocalyptic thinking and how that helps us to make sense of the ways that people have imagined the future. Then there's a series of, there's a selection of taster seminars. You'll be put into a group for one of those at 11:15 before we take a break. And then this afternoon we start with another really exciting taster lecture by my colleague Professor Stephen Morton in English called Human Non-Human. And the day finishes by thinking about things that we've just been talking about, your future, how the humanities can help you in terms of what it might be like to study the humanities at university and where that might take you. And we're joined for that session by some of our current students and also some students who have studied the humanities at Southampton and gone on to some really exciting things.